Good evening and welcome to Mining the Riches of the Parsha. Tonight is Thursday night, April 20th, 2023. I have missed you over the last number of weeks and I am so happy to be back with you. I'm grateful to every one of you for joining tonight and for giving us the opportunity to be able to study together. Just as a reminder, tonight, of course, we're meeting. It is 8 p.m. in Montreal. A week from tonight, April 27th, we will continue to meet at 8 p.m. 2 weeks from tonight, May 4th, we will meet at 7 p.m. And my tentative plan is that on Thursday night, May 4th, we will meet in person here at ADATH plus on Zoom. So you'll have your choice of either joining us in person here, but we will also be on Zoom. That is the tentative plan, and I hope it works out. I will keep you posted. Near the top of the list of the people I regret not learning from more deeply than I have is Rabbi Aharon Lichtenstein. In 1992, I listened to him speak in person in New York. It was an unforgettable, intellectually exhausting experience. Once, I thought I saw him enter ADATH, our shul, as I was speaking, and I almost fainted. It turned out to be somebody else with an uncanny resemblance. This Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh Iyar, the first day of the Jewish month of Iyar, is the 8th Yartzeit of Rav Lichtenstein, and tonight we pay tribute to one of the greatest Torah teachers and leaders of our time. Rav Lichtenstein was born in France, 1933. His family escaped in 1941, and they finally settled in New York. Rav Aharon Lichtenstein attended yeshiva at Chaim, Berlin. His Rebbe was Rav Yitzchak Kutner, with whom he maintained a lifelong close relationship. Then he went to Yeshiva University for college. After that, he went to Boston to get a PhD at Harvard in English literature. And he came back to Yeshiva University originally, first, to teach English literature at Stern College for Women, part of Yeshiva University. Meanwhile, he also married Tova Soloveitchik, the daughter of the Rav Yosef Soloveitchik. So Rav Lichtenstein was not only one of the closest students and one of the primary expositors of the teaching of the Rav, he was also his son-in-law. In 1961, Rav Lichtenstein was appointed to give an advanced Talmud class at YU. And in 1971, he accepted the invitation of Rav Yehuda Amital to move to Israel and to become a co-Rosh HaYeshiva of the yeshiva that they had just started, Yeshivas Har Etzion, in the Gush Etzion area south of Jerusalem. It's often known as Gush. And he remained there for the rest of his working career. Rav Lichtenstein is seen by many as the most authentic representation of modern orthodoxy and perhaps the greatest expositor of religious Zionism. And based on his wide scholarly output and his complex and developed positions on many contemporary issues, Rav Lichtenstein is considered by many, and I include myself, to be one of the people who is considered a Gadol Hador, one of the greatest Jewish teachers and scholars of the generation, like his father-in-law, the Rav, before him. Rav Lichtenstein was unique in many ways. He was probably the only student to attend the Rav's advanced Talmud lectures, which were among the most advanced Talmud lectures going on in the world at that time, and during class to raise a point as a student to the Rav by quoting Edmund Spenser, the famous English poet who wrote the poem The Fairy Queen. But there was no artifice in Rav Lichtenstein. He synthesized all knowledge to a deeper understanding of Torah. Now, there was a story that was told about Rav Lichtenstein for a long time, that he was a milkman. So let me just explain what that story is. During the Yom Kippur War in 1973, Rav Lichtenstein felt that he wanted to do something to help the war effort. All of his students in the yeshiva were fighting bravely on the front lines. I'm going to come back to this point a little bit later. He was beyond the age of military service at that point, but he wanted to do something to help the effort. So he went to the Home Front Command and he said he wanted to volunteer his services. And it just so happened that the local milkman had been called up from his reserve unit, and Rabbi Aharon took over the job of being the milkman to a neighborhood in Yerushalayim. Now, one of the people that he met on his route delivering milk to them was the great elder scholar of the Jewish people at that time living in Yerushalayim, Rav Yisrael Gustman. I have shared some stories about Rav Gustman with you, an incredible scholar and teacher. At this time, he was at an advanced age. And so he didn't recognize this young, clean-shaven man delivering milk to him, but they would engage in conversation. And after a few days, the conversation turned to a very complicated, esoteric, advanced Talmudic discussion. And later, Rav Gustman said to one of his students, "I am so grateful that God blessed me that at the end of my life I would be able to move to Yerushalayim, the holy city of Jerusalem. Even the milkman is an expert Torah scholar." It's a great story, and it certainly could have happened. The only problem is it's not true. It's not true. Actually, the two of them did know each other, and they did respect each other, notwithstanding the difference in their age. But this story is a true story. A true story of what Rav Lichtenstein did in the Yom Kippur War in 1973. He went to the army to volunteer. They said to him, "What can you do?" So he said, "Well, I have a PhD in English literature, and I can teach advanced Talmud." So they said to him, "What else could you do that might possibly be of help in this war effort?" So he said, "I can also do home electrical repairs." So they put him to work doing home electrical repairs. When Rav Yehuda Amital, his partner in leading the yeshiva, heard what Rav Lichtenstein was doing as part of the war effort, Rav Lichtenstein was urged by Rav Amital that he had other skills that could be used. And Rav Lichtenstein spent the rest of the war traveling around to army bases, teaching Torah, inspiring his students, inspiring soldiers, keeping the morale up. And it was a tremendous, tremendous effect that he had on soldiers at that time. This Tuesday night and Wednesday is Yom HaAtzma'ut, Israel's Independence Day, the 75th anniversary of the founding of the modern state of Israel. Allow me to share this shiur, this lecture that Rav Lichtenstein gave. The Torah describes two journeys of aliyah, of traveling to Israel, that Avraham took to reach the land of Israel from his homeland. Now, the first journey starts at the end of the Parsha of Noach, where the Torah says, Vayikach Terach es Avram beno. Terach took his son Avram, Ves Lot and his nephew Lot, Ves Sarai Kalaso and his daughter-in-law Sarah, meaning Avram's wife Sarai, at that time known as Sarai. Vayetzu itam Ur Kasdim, they left their birthplace of Ur Kasdim, Lelechas Arza Canaan, in order to travel to Canaan, the land of Israel. Vayavo ad Charan vayeshvu sham. They got as far as Charan, about halfway, and they stopped there. That's the first traveling of Avraham. Then, in the next Parsha, we have the famous words. God says to Avram, Lech lecha me'artzecha me'moladetecha me'beis el ha'aretz asher ereka. Go from the land of your birth to the land that I will show you, the land of Israel. The Ramban explains that Avraham left his home on his own because, as our rabbis tell us in the Midrash, there was an altercation with the king, Nimrod, and Avram's life was in danger, and so he left because he was worried about being persecuted because he was an iconoclastic monotheist at that time. Everyone else was pagan, worshiping idols. And so he left his home, traveling towards Canaan, because he wanted to be safe. He was fearful of persecution and recrimination. And they got as far as Haran along the way. While in Haran, Hashem appears to Avram and says, Lech lecha me'artzecha me'moladetecha el ha'aretz asher ereka. The journey that you already started on your own, you started it for your own reason and at your own initiative. I want you to do it now as part of my command, as part of my promise, that you are going to inherit this land, that you are going to have a people descend from you. I want this to be a mission. Avraham was commanded to do what he had already decided to do on his own for personal reasons, now becomes a mission initiated by God. Rabbi Lichtenstein comments that the same two steps that applied to Avraham's journey to Israel also apply to the modern Zionist movement of Theodor Herzl and others in the late 1800s. That secular Zionist movement began as a result of persecution. Because of our Jewish identity, we have to escape where we are because we are in danger, and we need to go to a place that is safe. We need to escape. And so Avraham is in Haran, halfway there. And then God breathes life into his pragmatic plan. Here is the intersection between Avraham's plan and God's providential plan to plant him and his descendants in the land of Israel. Classical Zionism, writes Rav Lichtenstein, had the same aspiration as Avraham when he started out, to escape Ur Kasdim, to provide political refuge for the Jews, to reach a place where it would be possible to exist, to go stronger, to fashion ourselves into a nation. And that's a legitimate goal. Those are legitimate goals. But no Jew, says Rav Lichtenstein, after the command of Lech Lecha to Avram, could think about the land of Israel as anything but a special country, the land of God's inheritance. This feeling penetrates deeply even within secular Zionism. And here's the point that Rav Lichtenstein makes, and it is just as, if not more, relevant for us today. We stand in constant tension between these two factors, between the consciousness that we are in need of a refuge and an assurance of our existence, and the full adherence to the vision to which God dedicated the command, Lech Lecha. From time to time, we need to be reminded that we must not veer from the boundaries of this dialectic, neither toward excessive use of force, nor to excessive spirituality. Yom HaAtzma'ut restores for us with full force and depth the consciousness that here, in Israel, in God's inheritance, we can fulfill visions, but also exist. We can realize dreams, but also live. That idea of a dialectic and finding a balance and living between two truths and two values is a structure that suffuses Rav Lichtenstein's thinking, writing, and teaching. One of the monumental ways that Rav Lichtenstein implemented his vision for religious Zionism is through his central role in the Hesder Yeshiva movement. So, for the last several decades in Israel, if you are a religious Jewish young man and you graduated from a yeshiva high school in Israel, you basically had three options. You could go to the army, Tzahal, the IDF. You could get an exemption from military service and devote yourself full-time to studying Torah. Or you could enter a yeshivat Hesder. Hesder Yeshiva, the word Hesder means arrangement. Hesder Yeshiva is an educational system where you combine Torah study and military service, moving from one to the other and back again, back and forth. And in fact, the yeshiva of Har Etzion, the yeshiva of Rav Lichtenstein and Rav Amital, was one of the first and is still one of the most respected of the yeshiva Hesders in Israel. So this arrangement, Rav Lichtenstein writes, is a convenient framework for discharging two different obligations. You can morally and psychologically salve both your religious obligations and your national conscience by sharing in the collective defense burden without cutting yourself off from the matrix of Torah. You don't have to give up one. You go from one to the other and back again. And this word Hesder, which means arrangement, might be misunderstood as an accommodation or a compromise, something short of ideal. But Rav Lichtenstein writes that is not correct. That is not what Hesder is. The goal of Hesder is to provide a context within which students can focus on enhancing their personal spiritual growth while yet heeding the call to public service, and thus enables them to maintain an integrated Jewish existence. That phrase, an integrated Jewish existence, is at the heart of Rav Lichtenstein's life and teaching. He goes on to write, the defense of Israel is an ethical and halachic imperative because the birth of the state was a momentous event in history with tremendous spiritual import, religious Zionism. There is a spiritual aspect to the growth and establishment of the modern state of Israel. Plus the moral element of serving in the military to be able to defend the citizens of Israel. Service enables the religious community as a whole to avoid both the reality and the stigma parasitism We're doing our share. It helps build personal character and open channels of public impact by producing potential leaders attuned to the pulse and the experience of their countrymen. Jews who are Torah knowledgeable and world knowledgeable, able to conduct themselves in every aspect of the world, every aspect of life. He goes on to say that throughout Jewish history, it is Hesder that has been the traditional Jewish way. Look back in Jewish history. What was the arrangement of the soldiers under the leadership of Moshe, Yehoshua, King David, Rabbi Akiva? How did soldiers conduct themselves then? They were all individuals who had both Torah learning and military preparedness, and they engaged in both as was needed. The fact remains, says Rav Lichtenstein, that the primary Torah tradition is Hesder. And in this way, we may keep both our spirits and our guard up. Now, this theme of an integrated Jewish life underlies every single one of Rav Lichtenstein's teachings and every moment of his life. Rabbi Menachem Genack tells the story back in 1967. Rav Aharon was still living in New York. He was teaching an advanced Talmud class at Yeshiva University, and during the summer, they were in Onset, Massachusetts, which is close to Cape Cod, and they were playing basketball. Rav Lichtenstein was playing basketball with his students, with the other boys. And at one point during the game, Rav Aharon turned to Menachem Genack, now Rabbi Menachem Genack, and he said to him, "It is not ethical to play offense and not defense. Every action must be integrated with halacha, Jewish law, Jewish values, ethics, even basketball." Allow me to share with you a further development of this theme that relates to Hanukkah. Rav Lichtenstein writes, there are two miracles commemorated by Hanukkah. The miracle of the oil, there was only enough to last one day, it lasted 8 days. And the miracle of the military battle, Rabim be'ad ma'atim, the Jewish soldiers were few, the enemy was overwhelming, and yet we were able to overcome the enormous odds against us. But if you take a look, if you think about those two miracles, the miracle of the oil was defined and limited in its scope. It took place inside the Beis HaMikdash, in the inner sanctum. It was only visible to a limited group of people, meaning the Kohanim. No one else could even see it. No one besides Kohanim even saw the menorah because it was inside the building of the Beis HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, that only Kohanim could enter. So it was extremely limited in terms of who had access to this miracle. On the other hand, the military victory was very broad. It was extremely broad in its scope, both in terms of the nation and the land. The victory stretched out across the entire country, and everyone was involved and affected by the victory. But here's the point of Hanukkah. These elements are meant to coexist, and severing them from each other leads to severe problems. Some people are connected to and involved with the temple, meaning their interest, their lives, their head is in purely spiritual matters. but they are disconnected from and uninvolved with the nation. Sometimes those who focus on the shemen zayis, the pure oil that was used for the menorah, limited, reserved, held in secret, sometimes forget about the rest of the nation. Others have the opposite problem. They're disconnected from the temple and its strictly pure olive oil. They are involved in the nation, but they're disconnected from anything spiritual. But Rav Lichtenstein says, here's the point, there is only one Hanukkah, during which we relate to both of these themes, to their intertwined nature. We need to relate to the entire Jewish community and formulate one integrated worldview. The religious Zionist community needs to exhibit commitment to strictly pure olive oil, shemen zayis zach, meaning the highest levels of spiritual attainment and all that it represents, and we need to strive to contribute to the shaping of the future of the state of Israel, the land of Israel, the nation of Israel, guided by the Torah of Israel, followed by the spirit of our forefather Israel. This integration of spiritual and material is essential to Rav Lichtenstein's worldview. Another major theme of Rav Lichtenstein's teaching and life is the integration of ethics and morality into every area of Torah life. One of the best examples of this is the deep teaching he shared in the aftermath of the tsunami in Asia in January 2005. He said, our natural response has been to recite Tehillim. People are in danger. We say Tehillim, we recite Psalms. Our prayers are not only for the Jews harmed by this disaster, but for the victims of all nations. He then goes on to point out some people concern themselves with the question of why it happened, voicing opinions on why the tragedy occurred specifically in that place and that time. We must distance ourselves completely from such shallow and false answers. We have no business poking our noses into the why. We have no business explaining or pretending to explain things that cannot be explained. We are left then with shock and silence. But he says there is something that we can and must do. He references the battle that the Jewish people fought against Amalek just weeks after they left Egypt. And that battle was waged by Yehoshua leading the army, and it was overseen by Moshe. And the Torah describes how Moshe was on the top of a mountain, and he was watching the battle unfold below him, and Moshe was sitting on a rock. Why was Moshe sitting on a rock, not a chair, not a cushion? Our rabbis explain, it's as if Moshe said, since Israel is suffering by having to go to battle, I too am with them in suffering. And our rabbis tell us, whoever makes himself suffer with the community will merit to experience the community's consolation. Now, Rav Lichtenstein points out, whether Moshe sits on a rock or a sofa makes no difference at all to those who are waging the battle below. Nevertheless, Moshe would never think of not identifying with the nation in a time of trouble in the midst of war. And he adds that this identification can help in a material way. First, it helps the person who identifies in terms of his or her moral level, but it also helps the person with whose suffering one identifies. Because when a person is suffering, he wants to know that someone cares. And perhaps on the material level, it makes no difference whether someone else feels bad because I'm suffering. But certainly on the psychological level, that identification, that feeling of empathy, the fact that someone else is upset because I am hurting, psychologically that means a great deal. And therefore it becomes an obligation. When people are suffering, human beings, anywhere in the world, we need to feel it. We need to feel bad. We need to be concerned. We need to be upset. And that in itself is something extremely worthwhile we can do. It once happened that a new translation of one of the Rambam Maimonides' great works was published. The Rambam's major philosophical work is Moreh Nevuchim. Usually the title is translated as Guide for the Perplexed. But Rav Lichtenstein agreed with a change in the translation, not Guide for the Perplexed, but Guide of the Perplexed. And it's so characteristic of Rav Lichtenstein to be so precise in language to see the difference between those two. But the point that he was making is, for Maimonides, for the Rambam to say, I'm writing a guide for the perplexed, that kind of implies I have the answer. You may be perplexed, so I'm writing a guide for you to be able to give you the answers. But that's not what the Rambam was doing. What the Rambam was doing is to show that being perplexed is not a contradiction to faith in leadership. So it's more accurate to give the translation guide of the perplexed. The Rambam, in a sense, saying, I am among those who is perplexed and who needs help. And the fact that I am perplexed does not take away from the Torah knowledge that I have and the leadership position that I have. And while Rav Lichtenstein was, of course, commenting on the Rambam's choice of words, of course, this reflected such a deep characteristic within Rav Lichtenstein as well, that it was not necessary to have all the answers. It was much more important to learn to live with integrity and honesty with the questions. Rav Lichtenstein wrote movingly about the three major influences on his life. His first Rosh HaYeshiva, Rabbi Yitzchak Hutner, his father-in-law, his main teacher, Rav Yosef Soloveitchik, the Rav, and Rav Soloveitchik's younger brother, Rav Aharon Soloveitchik. And listen please to the words that he wrote about Rav Aharon Soloveitchik, because there are many of us who apply exactly these words to Rav Aharon Lichtenstein. He wrote about Rav Aharon Soloveitchik, I was enthralled by what he was. A remarkable fusion of mastery and simplicity, of vigor and humility, and above all, a pillar of radical integrity. To an extent probably far beyond what he knew or could even have imagined, he was to me for many years a pole star. His hold upon me and the ambition and commitment it generated have not waned to this day. No truer words could I or many others say precisely about Rav Aharon Lichtenstein. Eli Fisher, someone I have the privilege to know, a colleague, wrote a tribute to Rav Aharon Lichtenstein, and he quoted Matthew Arnold, a famous sonnet, a poem that Matthew Arnold wrote titled To a Friend, which was very characteristic because Matthew Arnold is someone that Rav Lichtenstein often quoted. But Eli Fisher quotes this line to express his feeling, his appreciation of Rav Lichtenstein. Here are Arnold's words. but be his my special thanks, whose even balanced soul saw life steadily and saw it whole. What a marvelous line about Rav Lichtenstein. To see life whole. Everything comes together. But then Eli closes with a line from Tehillim. And this is a line from Psalms that, of course, King David HaMelech wrote about God. But it's a line that Rav Lichtenstein's students can well say about their master and their mentor. David HaMelech writes, Ashrei Adam Oz Lo Bach. Fortunate is the person who finds strength through you. Fortunate are those who have found their strength and their voice and their understanding through the magnificent life and teaching of Rabbi Aharon Lichtenstein. On this Yartzeit this Shabbos, may his memory be a blessing for his students and for the entire Jewish world. My friends, I want to wish you a beautiful evening and a gorgeous Shabbos. And I look forward to seeing you soon in person.